Hi everyone. Today we're going to have a discussion about AWS and mainly how AWS can help startups to build their products, their MVPs. I would like to ask our participants to introduce themselves and also thank everyone who is joined and going to also join later. So let's start with Igor. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Igor Shadrin, and I'm Startup Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. And I'm responsible for emerging market startup market.
And Abel, could you please introduce?
Okay. Hi, I'm Abel, the co-founder, the CTO of the dzook. We are creating an application which converts portraits into illustrations.
And finally,
hey everyone, I'm David. So I'm the founder of Activeloop. We are working on activating machine learning loop, basically, and we work with all clouds, especially AWS.
My name is Gore. I work as a data team lead at Krisp, which is also a startup using AWS. And this panel discussion is organized with the framework of Armenia Startup Academy Interaction Program. The program is implemented by Catalyst Foundation and supported by European Union's EU for Business Technology Development for Armenia project implemented by GIZ. Viva-MTS has joined the initiative as corporate partner and supporter. So we are ready to go after this introduction, and let's start with some questions. So basically, the first question I would like to ask, each participant about the role of AWS in their projects. What role does AWS play in them?
Okay.
Feel free to start.
Me or you, David?
Let's start from you.
Okay. So in the May of 2020, we decided that we are going public, and till that I had no experience with like DevOps and like deploying something to the cloud. And we decided to use the AWS as our cloud because as a smart grid portfolio company, we got credits, and that's why we started to use the AWS. So the main challenge was to deploy our service to the cloud. Then I started to like for a week learn about the AWS and how to deploy. And after 2 weeks, maybe, I've successfully deployed it using the Elastic Container Service with Fargate, and also with Elastic Load Balancer. And I chose Elastic Load Balancer because we needed to have a scalable solution which could scale depending on the load, because our application is very heavy, and that's why. So we are using different services from AWS like S3 Bucket for analytics, the CloudWatch, and also other many. David?
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So actually, before starting the company, I used to do my PhD at Princeton Neuroscience Institute, and we had to deal with a lot of images. And those images were like electron microscopy images of mouse brain. So we had to take a mouse brain and cut it into very thin slices, image each slice, and then upload all the data to AWS. So you can imagine like each slice could get up to 100,000 by 100,000 pixels. And if you have 20,000 of those, then you have petabyte scale data on AWS, and petabyte scale is like 1,000 times terabytes. So you can imagine the scale. And we had to run a lot of machine learning, especially like deep learning on this data. And just running it naively on AWS or any cloud resources is very expensive. And you don't want to buy all this hardware also on your side. So the first time we actually met AWS basically is actually running this whole scalable computation on AWS and trying to optimize starting from how to store the data, how to stream this to the machines, to run on CPUs, on GPUs, to how to like leverage all the spot instances you have on AWS. And that's how the company actually got started from our side, is that we learned a lot of insights that you can optimize the cloud computation and distributed computing on cloud computing, and like bring this to other companies as well. So, and then we got into Y Combinator, got as well credits as well, which we are very thankful to AWS, and started the whole journey from there. So AWS was probably one of our main like reasons to start actually the company. Without their infrastructure, we couldn't have been run like very scalable computations.
Great. From here, I heard like couple of points that I would like to continue. So basically, Abel mentioned about general the containerization and using the such technologies like Docker, Kubernetes, and for me myself also, it's like a question. Since I'm familiar with more data analytics related to AWS part, I'm not familiar. For example, what is the big difference between like a Fargate and EKS, like Elastic Container Service? Which one should we choose, or how we should use Docker in this context? Can you please elaborate on this, Igor, so we can have a better understanding in the
Yeah,
context
absolutely.
of MVP?
Yeah, thank you for sharing your startup stories and your MVP stories. It's very interesting to hear how the different startups starting their journey on the cloud. And you mentioned container service, and this is one of the common and one of the popular approaches nowadays for startups, young and mature companies to start their journey, because container technology has been developed as a Docker almost 7 years ago, and it provided a like really great way of creating environment and isolating your development local environment from your QA environment, test environment, that promotes into production in a very simple way, just using this container notation. And what we did from our end, we were listening to the customers who wanted to operate with containers on AWS, and we introduced a few services. Recently, Google came up with Kubernetes, which is like very robust and very advanced way of managing and orchestrating containers, which is like widely adopted right now around the world. And we even have on AWS our own managed EKS service. But I would say for startups who start in MVPs, going with Kubernetes or EKS, it's a little bit overkill, because you introducing so many overhead, which is not always needed on the first stages of your startup, on the first stages of MVP. So you're just taking your containers and simply put them on Elastic Container Service or Fargate, which is absolutely serverless, and you can easily manage your containers and literally just forget about managing infrastructure, creating auto-scaling groups, managing permissions and everything. You just simply take your already containerized application and you give it to Fargate, and you pay as you go. So it's flexible. It's like little to none overhead, and it also very scalable and reliable. So that's why when I talk to startups and when I see when they're ready or they just creating their first MVP on the cloud, I highly recommend them to look towards those services, and which allow them just move faster, just innovate faster, and just not spend too much time on configuring Kubernetes, not managing their own secrets, not managing configuration, and etc., etc., etc.
Great, thank you for your answer. I forgot to mention for our viewers that they could also write comments both here and on YouTube, and later after main questions we will take a look and like go through them and answer these questions. And I would like to focus your attention on one question that is more interesting also from my side as a data engineer. Often like we talked about processing and service part, and what your opinion about like using databases, especially when there's like this trend of NoSQL databases versus classic RDBMS databases like MySQL, Postgres. Which service should people go with, like especially in startups when they begin with, because everything changes very fast. So should they go with NoSQL, and what does AWS suggest here, or they should stick to like RDS? What you will suggest? I think it's very important for startup environment.
Yeah, I would love to hear from our panelists today how they chose data storage and databases. If you can share.
I can go ahead. So basically, when we started, we had to have a like quick DB solution and don't care about all the internals and how to deploy this. So we went for DynamoDB. So basically NoSQL, but we had like over kind of a SQL overlay. So the API that we were querying the data was with kind of SQL-like language. But the main point here is that it helped us to just quickly get started, put a DB there so that we have the user registration. We didn't care much about the cost. We had to also like add a lot of stuff there, and like all the tables were basically managed for us, and we don't have to care about the scaling, and everything was like done, everything behind the scenes. I think I will choose DynamoDB for just going straight and publishing all your data. But then later we actually, on our second iteration, so it's like MVP 2.0, we deployed everything ourselves, including MongoDB and Redis. So like we decided not to rely on much on external any provided services and have our own resources deployed. But that's like more customized, and you have to get into make sure that everything scales and reliable. So I think for just building an MVP, I will quickly go for a solution that, and also one more thing that's very important is that having an interface, like with the DB and with your early stages where you want to see your users, you want to go and change something manually. I think in this case, DynamoDB gives you a very flexible options where you can just like manually go and change the username or update the password hash for the user. So this gives you a lot of flexibility with your customer support. I think that was our choice. We'll be curious to learn more about Abel's case.
We have used Postgres with Elastic Beanstalk. The main reason was because of our experience, the past experience with the DB. So like the backend, we are using the Django, and that's why we have chosen the Postgres. So the main part is our experience.
Right.
And it was the fastest solution.
I see, got it. Thank you so much for sharing. Actually, this reminds me about the early days when I was a student and starting my career in IT, and I want to do a quick project, and I have to, like start my SQL database engine on my local host. I have to download the client, connect to the database, and then go there, just SQL, just update, insert. Everything was so complicated, and everything was so hard, and that's why it was not that many actually startups who was working with those technologies, because it was so difficult. Right now it's very easy. So as you guys mentioned, we have options right now to choose between relational database, whether it's MySQL or Postgres, or DynamoDB, which is the product on itself with NoSQL capabilities and super flexible and available as API endpoints, and you can visualize data and update it manually. So having this ability to access the data and touch it and quickly manipulate, it's a big advantage, right? When you build an MVP, you want to move fast, and that's the only thing which matters. So, and when we're talking about building MVP for startups, we usually advise them to go with the most convenient solution for them. If they feel that they want to choose relational database and they strongly feel that they are ready to create structures and follow structures and use some advantage of the relational database, like maybe in the future, like strong relations, strong typing, strong indexes. So in this case, they might choose going with relational database. And here we give them all flexibility. You can just with a few clicks set up a database, whether based on the MySQL or Postgres, and already have endpoints available with everything like replication and all the scaling. And you can easily with one click add read replica for failover availability. So if startups comfortable with relational database, but I totally agree that sometimes you don't know where you're going, right? And you just want to put your data somewhere, and you want to make sure that you focus on more important things like building some features for your product. And that's where DynamoDB is super convenient, because you don't have any capacity to think about. You don't have any like schema which you need just guess in advance whether this schema going to work or not. It's schemaless, and that's why you can put any data structures in a database and optimize it later. And I see that it's a pretty much strong trend for startups. Around the half startups I know personally from my experience, I see that they start with some simple solution with NoSQL, whether it's MongoDB, which is we have equivalent DocumentDB as managed equivalent on AWS, or they start with Dynamo for NoSQL. And they later see what kind of data patterns they see on their product, and then later they optimize, add some additional caching layer, or add some in-memory capabilities like managed Cassandra or Elasticache, Redis, and that's where my advice for startups is don't be blocked by this decision going with relational or NoSQL database. You can always start building with the easiest way which you have without blocking yourself and a team, and then you will always be able to switch the backend whether to relational database or back to NoSQL, or split. Actually, I see sometimes that people go in with a hybrid solution when they store partially data in a relational database, partially data in a NoSQL. So that's where, but even more, we have few special databases like Ledger database, QLDB, or we have Graph database. And this is for most advanced applications where we already know that you're going to be leveraging those advantages of those database engines. But in general, I would say start simple, and don't be afraid of that you're going to stick with this database forever. You will be able to change it and update it later.
So I noticed that we're diving into like technical details and talking about comparing different technologies, but what about the founders that they are not very, let's say, tech savvy, or like in contrast to our Abel or David that have experience with these technologies in general, what is like the way for this type of founders to fastly build some product? Are there any managed solution or like solution that help non-coders or not developers build something on the AWS, at least as an MVP to start with?
So I was wondering to ask you guys, whether do you feel that to build MVP, do you feel strongly that you need to find a developer or coder who will be able to build it for you, or do you feel that you can start just by going and trying things yourself?
So on AWS, yes, you need a developer. So in terms of the interface, it's slightly complicated for a non-technical person to be able to start an instance or start a database and so on. And that's why initially there was like services like Heroku, and there was another service, I don't recall the name, that got acquired by Facebook. So basically, I feel like I think AWS also recently launched a new product called Honeycode, if I recall the name correctly. So that should, in theory, let non-technical people to start any application on the cloud and hopefully also deliver to the all end consumer devices. So I guess I haven't had any experience with Honeycode, but maybe that's worth to give a try and see how it works.
And what about you, Abel?
So I think if you're not a tech founder, it's tough, like to deploy on your own. But from my experience, I can tell that the AWS support is very kind, and I've used it several times, and they helped me to like finish my deployment. I was having trouble, but I contacted them, and in several minutes they like fixed the problem. So if you're having trouble, you can always ask them. They're very kind. That's my point of view. And that's it. I think it's really hard if you're not a tech person.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Actually, I remember when I started my career, to build something, you need somebody who to build in front end, and you need somebody who build in back end and the database. So it was kind of you need the entire group or some very unique person who can build the full stack. Like nowadays, I see that industry moving towards the simpler solutions, and we recently see that, for example, developers become full stack developers who will be able to build the entire solution from starting from the top to bottom. And few things which I can say from AWS perspective. First of all, we listening to our customers, and we're trying to keep the pace innovation fast. So we recently, a few years ago, introduced AWS Amplify, which is a framework which helps to build your MVP if you're a developer, but you want to move fast and you want to build mobile and web experience all together. So with Amplify through the console, you can build and provision all the resources you need without even going in touching low-level components in a console, and it helps you provision all this users management, database, and much more things, and API layer for your front ends. But as that mentioned, recently we introduced Honeycode, which is another step forward towards the removing this barrier between entrepreneurs and the technology, and that's where it has a very common adopted spreadsheet-like interface. It has a lot of templates. It has additional features where you can just go and through a very common UI, the spreadsheet-like UI, go and look through tutorials, look through the community, and simply assemble quickly your MVP and start building something as a proof of concept. So I think that in general, I see that more and more tools being introduced, and I don't know, maybe in the future we will be able to say, "Hey Alexa, can you build me login page?" And you already have it. So this is kind of maybe dreams right now, but seeing how quickly we progress through the process of the removing this gap, I believe one day we should be able to do it even with voice.
Great. So basically, as I know, Honeycode is very fresh, so not many people probably had experience with it, but I think it should be interesting to try. And I have another question from myself. I would say that usually when you build the MVP, what is the process? You build something, and then very often you rebuild this because something went wrong, or you decide, okay, we just, and it takes time to rebuild it manually, especially if you use console or even if you use CLI. So I would like to know if like what are your opinion, guys, about like using this tools like CloudFormation or maybe alternatives like Terraform? Should you start with these tools right away to have everything in code and then easily rebuild all your MPP or scale your environment? Or you are usually go to dashboard and do everything manually and then try to automate it? What's your experience like? I would like to hear about this.
Do you want to start?
Okay.
Gore, Abel?
Yeah. So right now I'm using only the dashboard, like the web version with the UI. Several times I tried to use the CLI, but then I went to the dashboard and did it like faster than with the CLI. That's why I'm not using right now the CLI, but maybe I will try to automate some things and not to use the dashboard anymore. Like.
So before getting started as well, actually, Igor, from your last point, it's possible. So now you can already tell a natural language model, say like, hey, can you write a login page or can you write a to-do list in simple words, and then it will just spin up a HTML and CSS and make all the backend as well, write that simple code, boilerplate code to be able to write that. So it's very near future to say, Alexa, hey, build me an MVP website or landing page with these attributes. Regarding the transformation, like the Terraform and the CloudFormation, actually we were initially very heavy users of UI, but UI usually with cloud, because there's so many like configurations that you have to take care, is very complicated. And once you start using Terraform or CloudFormation, you actually don't want to go back to your UI and do that. So, but you have to use once UI to appreciate why it's very useful to use like code as infrastructure. And this helps a lot, like when you really want to run a lot of experiments. And especially if you're building at scale, you don't want to go to manually add like instances or configure the auto scaling group. Like especially like, let's say you want to run hundreds of GPUs on the cloud and you want to make sure that they are like spot instances, they will reschedule if they get killed. And doing this manually is like a lot of hassle. And you had to like, once you go more advanced, you need to use code as infrastructure. That's why like HashiCorp exists. And
right.
That CloudFormation as well on the AWS side. It's so super convenient, but you need to, I think, go through the UI first just to understand like what is the internet gateway or what is how to set up the VPS and like understand VPC. So you understand like how everything is set up and what everything is behind the scenes, and then feel free to use any code as infrastructure so that you know what you're scripting. So it's not like just a black box set of letters that you write and then you have an instance on the cloud.
Right. That's very interesting experience and a very different. So I would say automation is a way, like, for example, it doesn't make sense to automate things which you do once, but it definitely does make sense to automate things which you do multiple times. So for startups, usually what we see, if they set up their infrastructure once and they just have for example, e-commerce website for t-shirts and they build it, and for example, they have a Docker container. They fine with that, and once they start doing constant deployments, once they start doing a lot of experiments, once they start thinking about scaling, so that's where CloudFormation, Terraform, or any infrastructure as a code come in place, because it just simplifies, first of all, management. And in the bigger companies, we see that this is pretty common practice to do infrastructure as a code, because it's predictable, it's reliable way. When you go and do things manually, people tend to forget open ports, for example, for your HTTPS, for example, HTTP web server, or just enable access and port forwarding in VPC. So that's those things. When you're doing it once and you forget about that, that's okay for a startups. But again, once they start moving faster and want to have a quick pace, it's better to have a script. And in a script, you have all the steps in the right sequence. with all necessary attributes, and you don't have to go on UI and click through the dozen of services to check what about your configuration. You can look at your script and see, we have this security group attached to this set of autoscaling groups, so we can enable this port easily and redeploy. And that's advantage comes usually, yes, right, when startups start thinking about scaling beyond the MVP and taking to the next level.
Also, from my experience, like why we usually use cloud and AWS, especially because it helps like to remove some overheads, like to outsource a lot of stuff, especially like security, like hard topics like security, compliance, GDPR now, which is like a big pain for me as a data engineer. How does AWS help all startups to like offload this, especially when building MVP and stay compliant? What solutions are like, or what are new product services that emerged? Like I heard about AWS. There's AWS lake formations. There's AWS artifact. A lot of things going on related to uh, this compliance and GDPR. Can you please talk about this, Igor? What are your guidance? And guys, if you used any of these services, tell about your experience, how AWS helped you to like outsource all this and not be busy with that in the beginning stages.
Yeah, I was wondering to hear your experience, guys. If you can share about if you happen to experience any security or compliance things, and what was your experience?
Abel, you want to start, or you want me to start? Yeah, so I mean, I think we haven't yet got into very much details, but one of the core things that we were looking actually was the HIPAA compliance. So working with biomedical data and storing the data, I think the AWS has some support for HIPAA compliance, and we're considering to rely on AWS basically to offload the compliance itself to AWS and just be on top. Another technical issue that we have seen that actually AWS is very useful for our side is that since we deploy the software and we can deploy on premises as well, a lot of stuff could be hidden. Basically, if you just isolate the network, for example, and our clients, they're usually doing that. So we deploy our software on their side without worrying about the security, and their security people already taking care of that. So one thing that as a startup or when you're building the MVP is you want to delegate as much as possible all the security and compliance stuff to other parties, or like it could be AWS, it could be your clients, like security, network interface, so you don't have to deal with all the internals, because that's affects the speed a lot. And we had such a case with a pilot customer that we were like considering to, they're like a Fortune 500 company, and we were considering to deploy on their AWS services. But to go through this whole process of like making sure that everything is secure and reliable and enterprise ready for a startup, it's a big both distraction, and because you need to validate a lot of hypotheses before even going big. And in some sense, AWS is also helping so that you can have all the necessary tools to kind of avoid. Or there's also like AWS government. So I'll be curious to learn more about AWS Gov as well, and how they make sure that the AWS is secure for government-related applications. And yeah, that's all on our side.
Got it. Anything from your end?
Abel?
I had no experience like about the security part. Only once there were some bots who tried to DDoS us, and after that I've used the AWS route management, as I remember, and that's it. Other from that, I haven't used any security services.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Actually, security is one thing which usually, like startups either forget about, or when anybody's thinking about MVP, usually just put this aside somehow and think that we'll think about security later once we need to good to have our product out of the door. And for AWS, for example, security is the first thing. It's always been the first priority for AWS, and that's where when startups starting building their MVP on AWS, it's actually uses all the same technology which using with our other customers who are building their products on AWS, and they actually have advantage. For example, you as a small startup, you just think about like, I need to start just a little e-commerce website or a little processing, but you can use the same tools and the same technology which is used by other five like top Fortune 500 companies in the financial area and in other very sensitive areas. And for example, when we're talking about HIPAA compliance or PCI compliance for payments processing, or we're talking about SOC compliance for operational compliance, AWS helps startups to achieve and maintain this very high level of security and compliance. And what we do is we have actually the shared model when we take our responsibility on maintaining data centers, maintaining servers, maintaining underlying hardware, and we have achieved all these international accreditations and certifications. And if you need on your process of your certification or compliance, need any of this information, you can go to Artifact portal, which Gore mentioned already. And in this Artifact portal in your AWS console, you can get certification documents which were provided by internationally recognized companies who actually participated in who actually conducted those accreditations and certifications for AWS data centers. But from another perspective, from security, if you're talking about security in general, so I think that AWS is a most flexible and secure cloud which is available today. And by starting building on AWS, you have all the tools necessary. If you feel that you want to protect yourself from a web level attack, you can use web application firewall. You can route your DNS entries on our Route 53, and we have a much more different tools and techniques, and we have our teams, the security teams, who are constantly monitoring traffic and the usage and anomalies. And when any external event happens, like Abel mentioned that somebody wanted to DDoS you, you can actually get one of our products, which is called AWS Shield Advanced, where you have access to dedicated team who will be able to, in case of any anomaly detected on your website, any attack, or anybody trying to do some malicious activities, this team will be able to sit down and address those activities and help you protect the environment. So we took it even further. We listened to our clients, and we have even those additional measures for small and big companies. No matter whether you're a small startup or you're big enterprise, you'll always have access to the same advanced tools and techniques we have.
Great. Thanks for these details, because I also am facing the problem with it. I think the only problem with AWS, there are so many products emerging, services emerging, like not daily, but at least weekly. So it's hard to follow everything and know all about these services. Now, like there are probably more than 100 or 200 already. And another thing I would like to ask our participants to talk about, how data-driven are their startup at the beginning, or like in MVP stage? Are they collecting a lot of data, doing analytics? What products they are from or services from AWS they are using? because like data collection and data analysis is becoming like standard thing now, like as backend, front-end development, and like as ML engineering also becomes something like standard. I'd like to hear what's your experience and like maybe comments from Igor about this. Maybe David can start this
Yeah,
time.
sure. So actually, it's a very good question. When we started, we were mostly working with unstructured data. And unstructured data, you have a lot of images, you have audio, you have text files. We had to, at some case, we had to like work with dozen million documents to train a model for our client. And the problem here is that what we have noticed actually, there's no any specific tool or database for storing unstructured data. And the way people now store their data is they either store on a file system or on AWS EBS, or they store on S3, but it's very inefficient. And one of the core solutions that we provide as a company to our customers is a dataset management tool that's able to abstract away for all data scientists or machine learning engineers the way the data is stored for them. And we very efficiently rely on AWS S3 to store and manage their datasets. And those datasets can actually scale to petabyte size. And we help them to directly pipe this and stream this to their best machine learning framework to be able to train their models. And then later they can deploy on AWS or just test locally. So to answer that question, I think first of all, like for analytics for structured data, there are a lot of tools developed that you can use. There's like Amazon Athena. You can use Redshift for storing all the structured data. But when you get into the problem where you had to collect a lot of, let's say, images or text files or audio files, then things start to messy, and that's where kind of an unexplored area. That's where our company is getting into and providing customers like you can think of it as like a SQL for images or database or tensor database, so that our customers can actually store their data sets and quickly train their models on.
So right now we are not collecting any data, only like temporary storage. We have temporary storage for our images, and if we want to use some data sets for our machine learning projects, like for the training part, we are just uploading them to our EC2 GPU instances and using them inside of it. So from the data part, we are using on the S3 service right now, and also the database, as I mentioned.
I see. So here, we came up to some point that all participants shared some experience that they had, like especially some of you are working on both of you are working on data related products or machine learning related products, and so I would like to know what are the main challenges that you are facing, especially in the stages of MVP and in general, what you've learned from using AWS, and uh, what you can suggest as like share from your valuable experience that our viewers would like to hear. Maybe Abel can continue, and then David comment
Okay.
on this.
So the main challenge at first was the deployment part, the Dockerization and then deployment using the ECS and Fargate. Like I was struggling because of too many configurations. I thought that I did everything right, but when I was trying to run it, it didn't work. So I was confused. And after that, I connected with the support, and support helped me, as I mentioned earlier. And the main struggle was like too many configurations and very complex UI. At first, I thought the UI was very complex for the dashboard. Then I got used to it, and right now I think that it's intuitive. But at first, I thought that it is like very messy. So I think the main challenge is to get used to it. At first, it's very hard.
Got it. That you muted.
David, you are mute.
Sorry, that's a very good point. that UI is very, very complicated. And for beginners, it's like there's a big learning curve to get started.
Right.
Another issue that we had with actually providing services to our customers or users is the time that it takes to start a virtual machine. And on the boilerplate, like you had to wait a couple of minutes to just have a single machine getting warmed and started. And this is not, I know it's not just AWS problem. It's like it comes from the virtual machines and all the necessary stuff. But probably like the container services also try to solve this problem, but it's still you have to wait a lot of time to get a container running. So it could be another reason that you are kickstarting a virtual machine and run Docker on top. And that's just like a primary issue that we had when we were providing services. Because what we learned from the users, if you can like instantly give them, let's say, a GPU access to start training the model, like with just a single command line, they are in the instance and they are running. This is a very good it makes it frictionless for anyone to get started on training a model or deploying their service. Another big issue that we hit on AWS, and it's not for building an MVP, but so we started using Kubernetes EKS 2 years ago, and not just on AWS, but on Google Cloud as well. And the container engine there as well, like one of the biggest missing parts was the actually kind of storage part for Kubernetes. So having a shared and internal view of the whole storage you have, and also like as Igor mentioned prior to this, like managing all this, like how to scale, how to write the configurations, how to manage the pods, and then which container should go where, and so on. And then we had to actually build our own Kubernetes like infrastructure to manage spot instances and scale deployments for us. And the example that I mentioned with running on hundreds of GPUs, actually we did it on basically our own version of Kubernetes, rather than using EKS services, or at that time Fargate was not there either. So, the interesting thing is not just we did that. So I know a couple other startups as well. They implemented their own kind of Kubernetes-like infrastructure to be able to solve their use cases. So even though Kubernetes is very famous and it's getting everywhere and like deployed on on-premise as well, and you have also very good support for cloud services, I think there's a lot yet to be done to make it frictionless to just run a container on a cloud or on any machine. And to do it very quick, like just instantly, that will be a game changer in my opinion. And that's where I would spend a lot of resources to make cloud services much better.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Actually, we really appreciate the feedback from our customers, and you know that AWS is very unusually customer oriented. So like approximately 90% of our feature pipeline, which we working on, build basically on a customer feedback, and only 10% it's other things which we indirectly hear or we think that could be the driving innovation forward. So please, when you have any challenges, first of all, create a support ticket. I think that guys from support doing a great job trying to address the issues, and they're there for you 24/7. And also from another perspective, if you have some feature requests or some potential opportunities or innovation which you can see and feedback you can share, please reach out to your either account manager or your solution architect like me, who is supporting your startup, and share your thoughts, because that's how we that's the feedback which we actually need from you to understand how we can improve our service. For example, I want to give you an example from a personal perspective. When I was building my startup, we were building some API layer on Lambda, and Lambda is absolutely serverless and stateless, and you lose in the state when the Lambda is over, so you need to persist it somewhere, database or on S3. And we were dreaming about Lambda being able to connect to some shared storage. And just recently, it's been actually in development, and recently it's publicly available now. AWS introduced the ability to connect shared EFS mount to Lambdas. So now you can spin up your Lambdas mount to the same EFS and have a shared state somewhere in a shared EFS mount volume. So this is great, and we actually that's I believe was one of the many requests which we hear from our customers, and the same way we're moving forward towards our other services. So and please, I encourage all of you who listen to us and you guys to share your feedback and share your thoughts, and we will also be trying to do our best to improve our services. I believe it's like technology moving fast, world is moving fast, and we'll do our best to keep the pace of innovation. Correct.
Gore,
Yeah,
looks like
you're
you're
muted.
Yes, sorry. So since we don't have much time, I would like to also ask some questions from our viewers. Basically, we have two questions. I think the last one is more related to you guys, that's why I will pick that one. So we have a question from Maher who is asking, what are common pitfalls? What are the common pitfalls, or maybe not so common, but related to your experience concerning machine learning, model training, and development on AWS? What should you take into consideration when starting out? So both of you have machine learning experience. I think you can answer this question. Maybe David can start since he is, I think,
Sure. I think the main pitfall here is the cost. So you should be very careful with renting the GPUs on AWS. First of all, they are expensive. Then sometimes, let's say you're training a model and you forget to turn it off, and it could be there for a couple of days, and you will not get a notification until you see it on your budget. So that's a big pitfall. Another thing that in terms of deployment, you can actually optimize your deployment a lot. I know it's kind of a time issue, like how much effort you want to spend on making sure that the model is optimized and deployable on AWS. But for deployment, I would really advise to have like kind of a automated deployment setup where you have an auto scaling group with like more requests, more GPUs, and then if you don't have any requests, then all GPUs die. So just be very careful with the cost. They can easily escalate and then get very expensive.
And I know David is going to leave now us because he has another calls, but we can continue with another question. So thank you very much, David, for joining.
Thank you, Ron. It was
Thank
great
you, David.
to hear. Yeah, great.
Pleasure meeting you.
sharing
Pleasure
your
to hear from you.
So good luck.
All right. Thank you.
And we have another question, I think quite a common question that usually similar to security, many startups in early stages, they ignore this. So we have a question from Ivan who was asking, basically, are you like giving some granular permissions to users, or everybody can do whatever they want? And do you have some guy DevOps that manages this? What's your experience, Abel? And maybe also Igor can tell what is the best practice.
Yes. So I'm the our root user, and I'm giving the permissions. I'm not giving like full access. I'm just giving access to the permissions that are needed, and that's it. I think the question was like permission and IAM.
Do you have a DevOps person who is managing this?
No, not right now. So basically, the manager right now is me.
Okay.
So there is a good principle. Thanks, Abel, for sharing. There is a good principle in the information security world called the principle of least privilege, and that's where any user who created on AWS starts with 0 permissions, and then you add necessary permissions to the user as you go. So I would highly encourage everybody who's creating users, just first of all, when you log into root account, create another admin account and use this admin account rather than your root account, because root account is everything, and losing access to root account is a very painful process of restoring it. But with administrative account, you can start creating other users, and with this administrative account, you can start creating users by giving them only permissions they need. And also, you can look on the UI console. There is an access advisor, and this access advisor actually displaying any users or any services which has been used by this user, and advises the level of access. So I would highly recommend to doing that. And what I see in the smaller startups, again, in smaller teams, they usually know dedicated person who's managing access. It's the usually head of engineering or head of technology group, or the main dev lead who's doing that. But in the bigger organizations, there are definitely a dedicated person who is checking whether everybody have proper permissions and if the permissions managed properly.
Yes, I think that these are the main questions. There were some questions that I think, answered during discussion, and I would like to hear some advices or general guidance from Igor, because as a AWS representative, what you would like to mention, or like you would like all startuppers to hear, what are the best practices to start with cloud and get the most out of it without spending a lot of on it, I would say. What is the best way to go with AWS and building MVP?
Right. So the first thing I want to say that we really appreciate all the startups who choosing AWS to build their MVPs, and what we can provide from our end. We want to make sure that you can move fast and as a pay-as-you-go model. So you can try things, you can innovate, you can build your products without worrying that. Whether what size of the server you need to provision, or amount of the messages which the queue can consume, etc., etc. So don't be afraid of trying different things. Don't be afraid to go and try the service and see whether the service works for you and fit your needs, and try to move fast. And all startups coming from the MVP stage and then rebuilding MVP to MVP point two, as David mentioned. So don't be afraid to try and break things. And if anything happens, you can know that you can always rely on create a support ticket or reach out to us solution architects, who will be happy to advise and give you review the architecture with you, or help you to understand how to optimize services, or how to do things in a more efficient way. So just please please try things, and let us know. Keep in touch and let us know how's your experience.
And maybe I will also like to share a little bit from my experience. So already 3 years I'm using AWS. I would highly recommend you guys go and take some trainings directly from AWS, or maybe some partners. The trainings are really good, and when you just doing, it's fine. But when you take a training, especially on topics which are a little bit complicated to begin with, like IAM, VPCs, or cost management, and this, or passing some exams related to some certifications, this give you a really good foundation. And like, it takes not much time, but after that you are feeling that you know a tool, you have this hammer that you can use everywhere, or this tool that you are confident that you don't need DevOps help or other specialties. So I would also suggest to check out AWS website about all tradings, white papers. Generally, it will help you to become a better specialist and use effectively. Because I heard a lot of very familiar points from Yehor, because he's mentioning what to do, all these best practices. They're all in these trainings. Um, yes, and So we can, I think, sum up there, conclude and finish our discussion. Thank everyone. Thank David. He is not here with us, but thanks Abel for sharing your experience. Thanks Igor for guiding us how to use all the products. Thanks our viewers who are watching and commenting. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.